The new Samsung Galaxy A05s is 130 quid. Let's find out if it's worth it. So sporting a very similar design of what you'll find on the Galaxy A14 and other phones at this budget price, the Galaxy A05s is an all plastic design with those individual camera rings on the back. I've got it in black and it's a nice matte plastic feel which does detract fingerprints pretty well. And then on the right of the phone, you've got your fingerprint scanner embedded in the power button with your volume rockers above that. And on the bottom, you've just got a headphone jack, USB-C charging port, microphone and speaker grill. The left of the phone is where you'll find your SIM tray, and at the top, you've just got a single microphone. Overall, the phone is pretty comfortable to hold and it is pretty lightweight in the hand, thanks to that all plastic build. And you've got ever so slight curves on the edges of the phone, which they have now taken away on the new S24 models. So overall, the A05s is a pretty budget feeling device, and unfortunately that does continue around the front of the display. You get a 6.7-inch PLS LCD display with a 90Hz refresh rate, and of course it isn't one of their better displays found on their budget phones. It's not as good as ones found on the A34, A54, anything like that. It is just one of their bog standard displays, the same as what I found on the A14. And the 90Hz refresh rate does help with its smooth responsiveness, but it isn't the most smooth and responsive display that I have used, and color reproduction isn't the most vibrant. Again, what I found with the A14, you're gonna have to go up to maybe the A34 or A54 if you want that luxury. And as per usual at this sort of price point, the bezels around the phone are pretty chunky, especially as you get a larger chin at the bottom. But you do get a dewdrop notch at the top, which houses the 13 megapixel selfie camera. So overall, for a budget phone at 130 quid, the display is absolutely fine. I don't think you're going to have any major complaints with it, unless you're someone that's really into their content consumption, like playing games and watching videos. You might want a display that's just a little bit better and a little bit more color accurate. And as for RAM and storage on the A05s, again, this is an area where Samsung dipped back just to cut the price down a little bit more. You get 4 gigabytes of RAM and just 64 gigabytes of storage on the base model. And it is unfortunately eMMC 5.1 storage, so you don't even get the faster UFS 2.1 or 3.0 storage on this A05s. So the 4 gigs of RAM is kind of expected at this sort of price point, but the 64 gigs of storage is unfortunately just a little bit low. There is an option with 4 gigs and 128 gigs of storage and 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage as well, so I'd probably go for one of those. But yeah, 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage is the very base model of the A05s. Of course, it is expandable if you go out and get yourself a micro SD card to expand that storage. But as for me, on this base storage, that is just a little bit low. And then performance is taken care of by the Snapdragon 680 4G processor. So you don't get 5G connectivity with the A05s. And whilst performance is okay from day to day, it isn't the fastest processor on the market, and it's not as fast as other phones using the 680 that I've used in the past, namely the Oppo Reno 7 and Honor X8A spring to mind, and there are plenty of others around and others that I've used that have felt a little bit more snappy than the A05s. A lot of the time navigation is a little bit stuttery, and I did think to myself, well, when I first set the phone up, I'll just obviously wait for everything to download and everything to sort of settle down before I started using it again. But I have found the performance to be stuttery all the time, really. And I don't know if it's just to do with Samsung software on this phone or anything like that, because like I said, other Snapdragon 680 phones I've used have been absolutely fine. But on the A05s, personally for me, it's just been a little bit stuttery. But it might be fine for other people that don't use their phone that often. So yeah, it's about as basic as what you'd find. And an area where the A05s redeems itself just a little bit is in the battery life. You get a large 5000 mAh battery which supports up to 25 watt wired charging, and this is enough to get you through all day, no problems, sometimes into a second day. The good thing is about that 680 processor is it's nice and efficient, it's not a very power hungry chip, and the fact that you don't get 5G connectivity does help with the battery life again. So there is a bit of a silver lining with the fact that it's using a 680 processor. The battery life is absolutely great. Full day, no problem. 2 days if you're a light user, not a problem at all. And then as for software on the A05s, until recently it was running the latest Android 13, and this is on top of One UI version 5.1. And then One UI is One UI, you get your usual customization options with themes and wallpapers and that sort of stuff, and you get the usual Samsung look. But then Android 13, of course, now isn't the most up-to-date software. It may get Android 14 as the phone has only just recently come out, so we'll see if that happens. But overall, the software experience is about what you expect from a budget Samsung phone. If you've used like an A14 or an A13, it's going to be very similar to that. And the overall experience is going to be very similar to using an A13 or an A14 because the size of the phone is very similar. The feel, the build is all very similar to those phones. And then of course that camera is very similar as well. And then lastly, onto the cameras of the A05s. You get a triple camera setup headlined by a 50 megapixel main camera, and that's backed up sadly by just two 2 megapixel macro and depth cameras. So unfortunately you basically just get one usable camera on the back of the A05s. The macro camera, of course, those 2 megapixel shots aren't going to be that usable, and the depth camera a lot of the time you can do without. But overall photo quality from the A05s is about what you'd expect at this budget price, very similar to what I found on the A14. Color accuracy is pretty good, although you do get a bit more of a Samsung color profile on those photos, and detail is pretty good as well. And of course it uses that usual 4-in-1 pixel binning to give you 12.5 megapixel shots. And then video tops out at just 1080p at either 30 or 60 FPS. And this obviously is just going to be bog standard budget video quality. Great for your home movies of your kids and your pets and that sort of stuff, but not really anything more. And then the 13 megapixel selfie camera produces some pretty decent photos. Of course, they are slightly higher resolution than a lot of the 8 megapixel budget selfie cameras on budget phones today. So you do get a little bit more resolution, and it is just bog standard photo quality that you'd expect from a phone at this price point. And then video tops out at 1080p at 30 FPS. And again, it's nothing to rave about. It does the basics for video calls and that sort of thing, but not really anything more than that. That's my quick look at the A05s. Unfortunately, there's not a huge amount to say about this phone. It is a budget 130 quid Samsung phone that does everything that you need. But of course, if you're after a phone with faster performance, more RAM, more storage, better cameras, you are likely to want to look elsewhere. There are plenty of Honor phones that offer that. Other Motorola phones offer that, and then of course there's phones from the likes of Xiaomi and Oppo as well, which a lot of the time offer better value, faster charging, better screens, just overall better phones. But if you're stuck at getting a Samsung device, the A05s is absolutely fine, and 130 quid, I don't think you can complain too much about what you're getting for that price. But let me know down in the comments what you think of the A05s. Is it a phone that you'd consider buying? It is available from Argos here in the UK, like I said, for 130 quid, and you can probably buy it on Amazon and eBay as well. So let me know down in the comments what you think, and I'll see you next time.